Looking around, the dad groups are also inviting. There's a sense of brotherhood, especially toward new dads who are nervous and inexperienced. But on the other side, one mom can say something misinterpreted, then it's like September 11th times 1,000. Story 1. Just saw a video online about how male and female bullies tend to differ. I think it's a lot more than what many of the comments are saying and more about how people display their aggression. If a man is aggressive, he tends to be violent or disruptive. Someone like that would either be kicked out, ostracized, or put in their place. This also heavily incentivizes not being aggressive. Women tend to be indirect with their aggression and are more likely to spread rumors, gossip, use body language, or not engage with someone. This gives enough plausible deniability for others to think they're doing something, but it's not enough to act on. So disgruntled people complain about the ones causing the stir instead of confronting them. These behaviors aren't always gendered, but they tend to be. Also, I imagine there's a fair bit more to it than this. Story 2. I cannot speak to mom groups because I am not a part of one, but I think overall men do not take stuff like social gatherings and situations all that seriously. Story 3. I was a youth worker many years ago and headed up a dad's group for new fathers. It was so much fun. Guys had the opportunity to just be themselves without trying to impress anyone. Story 4. I hate to resort to gender stereotyping, but I think dads care less about some of the stuff. There are plenty of moms like that too, but they are generally not the ones following every TikTok or fashion trend. From my observations, at a function, like a kid's birthday party, the moms will gather with those they know and form a circle. They'll talk, and breaking into that circle is hard. It has to happen outside of a group gathering. Dads will generally just hang. If they know each other, they'll hang. If you know sports, you're good. I'm not good. Dads and men don't notice or care if you wore the same shirt as someone else or last week. And we don't need or want the drama of conflict. I'll just tolerate some idiot at a function. My wife will avoid that function if possible. Story 5. Ask women? I stay away from those groups, and so does my wife to the extent she can. Otherwise, she finds sane women and keeps the others at arm's length. She's entertained me for years with stories of the mom groups and parent-teacher associations. I've returned the favor by sharing the stupid things men do. Story 6. I went to a birthday party at my son's new kindergarten class a weekend ago, and all the moms knew each other from preschool already and had formed their respective cliques. It felt like high school trying to talk to these other women, and I ended up giving up and sitting in my truck halfway through. We went to a preschool in a neighboring town, but I chose a closer school to our farm for kindergarten because I wanted a shorter commute for him. Regrets, though, because the other school's parents and I all got along. I went from being the number one liked parent in class to a nobody no one wants to talk to, and that hurts my heart in my mid-30s. Story 7. I told my husband this very thing recently, that I am envious of men and their camaraderie, their support, and generally how they look out for one another. As a woman, I just don't get the same. Story 8. Whenever you get a group of women together, there is always at least one who is going to start drama. Then the others will gossip about it behind their backs, causing more issues. Men would simply not bother getting together if there is going to be drama or would just say, "Stop being unreasonable." And that would generally be the end of it. Story 9. One of my best friends is the only dad in the friend group and is the primary parent. His struggle to find a parent group of any kind has been horrible. Women's groups won't accept him, and men's groups are so few and are generally not welcome anyway at the parks and whatnot. Story 10. I cannot speak for every group, but in our National Childbirth Trust class, the mums would meet up and the dads would meet up socially. What I would hear from my wife was that everyone was having a dreamy experience. Then, when I spoke to the dads, I'd get the truth that everyone was having issues with sleeping and feeding. The mums were lying to each other about how well it was going, maybe frightened of judgment or of failing, but it was less supportive. This may be only my experience, but it was a shame. Story 11. A lot of mom groups are stay-at-home moms. It's like literally the one thing they do besides taking care of the kids in the house, so everything is amplified in terms of importance. Most dad groups are full of guys that work all day. The group is simply not that important to them. Story 12. The filter of who these groups attract for a variety of reasons is quite different. Assuming there are fewer dads groups than mums groups and overall fewer men participating, the men choosing to participate might be naturally more prone to positive social engagement, which makes it not so much a men and women being worlds apart thing. Other factors like the state of paternity leave and the time fathers opt or are able to take off work probably increase that effect, as now the time available to participate in activities outside of work also decreases. Story 13. Women are usually the default parent. If a mom is burnt out or bitter about dealing with kids, she still has to manage. That attitude extends to behavior in mom groups. A few bitter, unfriendly moms can sour the tone of an entire group. Dad groups are composed of men who actively want to be dads. They're happy and excited about kids. Dads who aren't interested don't join dad groups. They ignore or neglect the kids. Story 14. Men are simple. If we like you, we'll show it. If we hate you, we'll show it or leave you be. Also, men have a harder time meeting and making friends, so anytime we do, it's just going for it or moving on because we don't have time to waste. Women have a lot more third spaces, meaning they can interact with other women of comparable or similar interests more frequently and easily. Story 15. Differences between men and women. Women typically engage in social and emotional conflict, while men typically engage in physical conflict. There's a Robert E. Howard quote that goes as follows: "Civilized men are more discourteous than savages because they know they can be impolite without having their skulls split, as a general thing." You can apply this to many things, such as online versus real-life interaction, and men versus women. Men's interactions are more underpinned by an implicit possibility of violence than women's, so we learn to play nicer, or to fight well as a result. Story 16. Dad groups are dads hanging out and just enjoying some adult company. Mom groups are moms competing about having the best kid or being the best mom. As I am not a mom, I have little experience with organized mom groups. However, I do have quite a bit of experience with groups of moms, and they are quite intolerable. If one mom takes out a snack they picked up for their kid, another mom will always go, "Oh, you're giving your kids?" Insert random commercially produced food. I haven't dared myself. I want to make sure the kids get all the nutrients they need, and I don't trust the additives in industrial food, so I make all their food and snacks from scratch. Silly paranoid me. Insert superior fake laugh. One mom will share a milestone of some kind, baby's first tooth, first time rolling around, first step, or what have you, and before she's finished her story, all the other moms will be sharing their own story of how their kid did that much earlier. One mom will have a new stroller, and another mom will comment on how they considered getting that very same model a while back, but due to it lacking feature X or Y, they opted for a different model. They never outright say anything bad about each other, but every other sentence is a subtle insult wrapped in courtesy. Story 17. Because for a lot of women, the role of mother becomes an all-encompassing identity, and for most men, the role of husband and father remains on equal footing with the roles of provider and protector. Men are expected to provide emotional solutions to emotional problems, practical solutions to practical problems, and marital solutions to marital problems. A woman might seek out emotional support on a long-term basis. Men generally will seek support in order to gain insight into a solution for a problem right now, and once that solution has been gained, the support is no longer needed, so it is discarded. Story 18. I don't know why, but I know it's absolutely a reality. My wife hates female-specific or dominated groups because they are so extremely toxic almost without exception. Story 19. Women often focus on controlling the people around them with words and subtle influence, whereas men tend to use a direct approach. Directness stands alone. You can rely on your direct approach and attitude to take you where you need to be and get what you want. By focusing on this approach, you don't need to worry about other people judging you. You are your own entity. But women can't rely on their subtle influences in the same way, especially if there are many other women around them who aren't on their team and who won't work with the flow of their subtleties. If there are too many different attempts to influence people, then they overlap, resulting in confusion. So women may see each other as threats unless there is good communication and a common goal for them to rally around. Story 20. I think it's more to do with men being more open to new people. If you're at a barbecue, walk up to the guys around the grill with a beer in your hand. You're probably more than welcome. Just don't be weird, and you're good. Women tend to be more cliquey and have more social rules around them. Guys don't be weird or a jerk, and you're good. Story 21. Selection bias. You see a lot of college-educated men and older men joining a dad group. Mom groups have the whole spectrum of the population of women, more so than dad groups. Story 22. I think it comes down to biology. I know it sounds bad, but just listen. I'm a lot less protective and picky than my wife. She measures everything, reads all the articles, has me take our son to the emergency room whenever she asks, and never leaves our son alone or around something he shouldn't be around. I am more than willing to let her take the wheel for our peace of mind. In my head, he's a sturdy kid. I was super protective at first, but I've gotten much more relaxed. I carry him in precarious positions, pop wheelies with strollers and shopping carts, and have more fun with him than I probably should. Mothers are definitely more protective because they're the ones that gave birth. The kid considers itself part of the mother for the first few months of its life, and I get the idea the feeling is mutual. Fathers can be protective but don't have that kind of attachment. While this can be great, as mothers keep the kids alive and safe, there can be downsides. Mothers believe their methods are the definitive way to raise a kid, and challengers are calling them bad parents. Alternatively, fathers don't care as much and thus don't feel as threatened. Story 23. I don't see it this way at all. First, I need to preface this by saying that I've been a single dad for 15 years and have been the sole caregiver to my children, who are all in high school. I have never remarried and am currently not seeing anyone. So it's just me and my crew. The moms have always been decent and friendly to me. However, I have never once been included in any mom group activities when it would have been nice and helpful to get a pinch of inclusion to help my kids build rapport with their kids. It was extra challenging for me to fit in when I really needed to because there is no female presence in our home, and I wanted to be involved at school and in the parental community. I made do somehow, and it's all good. The dads were equally as friendly and, for sure, a lot more welcoming. That part was great. They saw what I was doing and how I was in a tricky scenario, and they were cool about reaching out to me. The problem I wound up having at first was resentment towards them because the vast majority weren't carrying much of the parenting load in the house. So get-togethers were mainly about drinking beer and watching sports, and very little to do with kids' activities aside from cutting the kids loose and letting the moms worry about them. I found myself chasing my kids around when I didn't need to. Then that led to the parts that made me walk away altogether. Once I got to know the dads pretty well, I saw a lot of true colors. Some were just lousy fathers. Some had substance abuse issues. Some were cheaters or liars. Some were a combination of things. There were a couple of decent guys, but the flip side for them was that their wives were usually the problematic ones. Of course, my experience is probably unique, and certainly it's not like this everywhere, but in my neighborhood, that's how it goes. I quit hanging out with any of the groups and lost some longtime friends because of it. I'm fine not being socially involved these days. I think one day I'll find a new place to make some new friends that I can relate to, but in my current world, most of the dads are hiding behind a phony smile. Story 24. Most dad groups have little sexual competition, as they have found their mates, and guys have always established clear boundaries better than women, probably due to the physicality of consequences that men use. Whereas women tend to have to use subterfuge against men, it becomes more of their repertoire of skills. Honestly, there was an experiment that showed guys worked fine with no female in an extremely isolated environment. However, once women were introduced to the dynamic, the women pitted the men against each other until they all culled, banished, or isolated all the other men. The problem with this is that the lion gets old and dies, and you are a fool to think you can answer every problem yourself. Basically, if the guy barked at a woman who was clearly sowing dissent from an outsider's knowledge, men tended to believe and defend the woman whenever a man would lean into a physical response. This also aligns with misconceptions on domestic violence, which is that 1 out of 4 couples experience it. Almost 50%, slightly under, is mutual, and when it isn't mutual, women are the aggressor 70% of the time. Men, however, cause the most injuries, and the injuries are mostly caused in mutual domestic violence situations, not one-sided ones. Story 25. I'm going to speculate here. It's entirely personality. Women are much more prone to negative emotions than men. This is beneficial when there might be a bear around the corner who might eat your child, but it leads to many casual events becoming critically stressful. The dads show up, and it's like, hey, look at this new thing. It's going to be fun and amazing. The moms show up, and the threat detection is set to maximum. What if I forgot something? What if my kid misbehaves? What if I look like a bad mom? To them, this isn't a low-consequence social gathering. It's a chance to prove themselves or damage their reputation.